Hey there, everyone. Good to see you. Happy Monday night. I hope you had an awesome weekend. Let me type in a chat here and I'll get everybody converted and promoted. Let's see. Happy Monday, the last Monday in June. Boy, hard to believe the year's almost half over. Crazy. Okay, so let's get everybody promoted. Augustine, good to see you, buddy. Amy, good to see you. Chris, good to see you. Christina, good to see you. Hopefully you're doing okay, Christina. And Christine, good to see you. Lots of Christinas and Christines. That's like the Jody and Judy. I think you guys are doing it on purpose. So that's okay. I can laugh at myself. It's actually a healthy thing to do. Okay, let's see. Maxine, good to see you. Michael O'Keefe, good to see you, buddy. Hopefully you're doing okay up in Massachusetts. Rob, good to see you. Hey, Rob, did OJIS get started okay on the process? Let me know where you stand on that. I saw you found your actual correct link to send to him, so that was good. Shirley, good to see you. Lana, good to see you. Let's see, Jeff Johnson, good to see you, buddy. Teresa Green, good to see you. Feels like it's been too many moons, Teresa. So, actually, if you get a chance, Teresa, maybe set up a strategy call. We can catch up. Tony, good to see you, buddy. Ursula, always good to see you. I think that is everyone. For some reason, some of the promotions aren't going through. So Christine, Simonson, Lana, and Tony, I'll look to see you. Hopefully I'll see you. Hey, Sasha, good to see you. Bringing up the Monterey coast there. So now we're down to Christine, Simonson, and Lana Urshoff. Let me look for you and see if you're actually on and promoted. For some reason, it's still showing you not promoted. Tom Wall, good to see you, buddy. Mary, good to see you. Okay, let me just do one more quick check here, guys, and we'll get started. Alexandra, good to see you. If someone allowed to talk, Christine and Lana, I did try to promote you, but for some reason, you must be on your phones. That's probably what it is. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. Hope you're well. Hope you had a great weekend. Tonight, we're going to compare lease options with rent to own. And I know it can be confusing if you're not used to dealing with them. At least I was all those years ago. They are very similar, but there's some real key distinguishing factors and really important ones too. So lots of ramifications financially and legally. And so you definitely want to understand. And I went online earlier to see if I could find a couple of contemporary documents we could use, and I did. So I got a couple of Word docs. One is like a hybrid option agreement. Another one is a traditional option agreement, but modern language, and the other one's a straight rent to own. And we'll go over there to compare and contrast. But before we start getting into that, let me know. I mean, you can unmute yourself and talk, or type in a chat box if you prefer. Let me know if you've ever been involved with either a rent to own or a lease option. So, and you can do a hand raise if you want to do that too. But either unmute yourself and speak, or put it in the chat box, or just do a hand raise. Let's see. Shirley's done both. Michael hasn't done one. Okay. So let's do a quick little quiz here first and see what our knowledge base is. Kai, good to see you, buddy. Anita, good to see you too. Bringing up the LA, coast of LA. Good to see you. Long time, by the way. Okay, so let's do this. What would you say, or when would a rent-to-own agreement, when would you say that that would be appropriate, or let's just use the word appropriate. So, and don't be shy. Type in your answer, or if you want to unmute yourself, call it out, and let's get some discussion going here. So, when would you say a rent-to-own would be appropriate? And it's okay to even guess. I just want to kind of check and see where everybody is. So let's see what kind of answers we get here. See, so far nobody's, oh, here we go. Income good, but self-employed without 2 years taxes. So that's Tom G. Good to see you, Tom. 2 nights in a row, Tom. So Tom and I had a family reunion on Zoom last night. We do that every quarter. Thanks to Tom's wonderful wife, Sheila, for putting all that together. So it keeps everybody together. Okay, so that's one correct answer. The would-be buyer, i.e. the tenant, would like to own a home, but they just don't have the financial credentials. Could be, income limits, could be credit history, could be debt to income ratio, okay? And what's interesting, if you think about it, if you're a landlord and you're being asked to rent to someone who wants to rent your property with the idea of buying it at a future date, and it's clear that they can't get a loan, what are your feelings going to be about that? Would you be more hesitant, or would you be more agreeable? See, most people would be more hesitant. Okay, if somebody else didn't qualify them, why would I qualify them? Well, the thing is what you're looking to do is strike a balance between risk and reward. So let me just describe this to you. Let's say you have somebody who would, through the last year, maybe they lost their job due to the virus. Okay, in more traditional terms, people get divorced. Sometimes they get married and get divorced, or they get injured. Okay, all kinds of things can happen, or the company they worked for went out of business, they got sold or downsized, what have you. But historically, if you look long term, they did pretty good with their credit. They were paying their car payment on time, paying their bills on time. Maybe had a good credit report historically, and they want to get back on their feet again. See, that's somebody you would probably want to give a chance to, right? Let's help them out. You're not necessarily getting a handout, you're giving a hand up. Okay, so that would be an example. Also, what about economic factors? What about an up market versus a down market? So in an up market, people are getting crazy with their money, right? And sales are through the roof, and people are outbidding each other. But when would you say the credit markets are more tight? Are credit markets more tight when the economy is flowing and everybody's buying and selling, or the credit market's tighter in a down market? That's correct. Credit markets are tight in a down market. So in the last recession, I'm sure you probably remember, especially if you had your license back then, even though there were people who were capable of buying, it was really, the lenders were really being strict. I mean, it was extremely difficult for them. So in that time frame, a rent to own might be a viable solution. Okay. So far, any questions on this so far? Like, when would it make, let's see, this is from Tom, wanted to buy but didn't qualify, so I rented with the option to buy. A year later, I qualified to. Yeah. So Tom, we're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about a lease option versus a rent to own. What I'm getting at here is the premises that would lead you to believe that a rent to own would be a viable option are the same ones that would lead to a lease option to be a viable option. Okay. So let's talk about some of the, let's just stay on rent to own for a moment. In a rent to own scenario, typically what happens is a portion of the rent is applied to the purchase of the property. Usually it's applied to the down payment. Okay. So in your opinion, just strictly on financial terms, who does it sound like this type of agreement benefits more, the owner, the seller, or the tenant would-be buyer? Who would you think the benefits lean more towards in that scenario, owner or tenant? Yeah, the seller. There are some that go to the seller, right? But to the tenant, think about it. They get a portion of the rent that's applied towards, essentially, it's called contractual equity, right? They don't actually own the house, but they have a contract that says that a certain portion of the rent goes towards the purchase price, and usually in the form of a down payment. Okay, so which leads to something else. Raise your hand if you've ever had to evict a tenant, or you have an owner or a client who's ever had to evict a tenant, if you've done it yourself. I know Alexandra and Ursula had a background in that business, so it's not a lot of fun, is it? It can be quite painful, and yeah, and a very stressing. Now, here's what's interesting. So let's say you're in a rent-to-own agreement. You're the owner, and you have a tenant renting from you. Portion of rent's going towards the down payment, and they default on the rent. They all of a sudden fall behind on the rent, and you feel like you're forced to evict them. What's going to happen when you go to court and you go to evict a tenant because of the breach of the lease, and it's a rent-to-own lease? I know a couple of, I see some smiles, and some of you probably know the answer. What would you say the answer is?
They're owners.
They are. They have a degree of ownership, and it's called contractual equity, and they actually have financial equity too. So here's what happens. This is true in every state that I've taught in, which is 48 states. Whenever a person has any degree of ownership, and most states say it's $1, if they have even $1 of equity in the property, $1 of ownership, that court, usually the magistrate's level, can't hear the case. It needs to be a foreclosure, not an eviction. Okay, and I'm sure, as you all know, foreclosure is a lot more time-consuming, expensive, and even difficult in some states like California, New York, New Jersey. And if you're Canadian or no Canadians, it's extremely difficult in Canada. It's very rare in Canada. So, in any case, so now when you look at upside potential and downside risk, who has greater upside potential in this scenario, and who has greater downside risk? You guys are so quiet. We'll get
the potential purchaser.
Yeah, they've got the greatest the upside potential, and the owner has the greatest downside risk, because if they default on the rent, you can't just evict them; you have to foreclose on them. So it's basically advantage tenant in that scenario. So historically, I have not recommended rent-to-owns to my owners, to my investors. But I'm not completely against it. There are definitely scenarios where I think it could be a good deal for the seller too, particularly if it's a down market, nobody's able to buy, and the seller really wants to sell, and you find a tenant who's willing to do that. That can be a viable option. And money's tight. People just don't have that tens of thousands of dollars sitting around. So, okay, any other questions or comments on a rent to own? Alexandra and Ursula, have you guys ever come across that when you were doing property management? Have you ever had a rent to own agreement, or were they strictly leases? Looks like you're muted. They're probably waiting on each other.
No, we work mostly with multifamily investors. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I only had to lease. I only would lease the property.
Okay. So let's do this then. Let's go ahead and move over to a lease option. In a lease option, it's a lease with an option to purchase. You have two separate documents. Or in a rent to own, you have one document. In a lease option scenario, you have two documents. The lease, which is a straight rental lease, okay, and an option agreement, which has nothing to do with the lease. It may reference a lease, but it's simply a legal document that gives the lessee, in other words, the tenant, the legal option to buy the property at a future date, at a future price, with certain, future terms that are predetermined. So let's just break this down. In a lease option, the lessee, the tenant, has to come up with an option fee. There's no owner that's going to give somebody an option to purchase the property for free, right? And I don't mean the property being free. I mean the option to purchase the property. The option is a separate legal contract. It's a separate part of the transaction. So in your estimation, what would you guess would be a reasonable option fee as a percentage of the purchase price? So go ahead and type in your answer if you want. Let's see what kind of answers we get. And actually, while you're typing in, guys, Lon, I apologize, I missed your question here. In eviction, in the case, who will keep the tenant's equity? Remember, you really can't evict a tenant who's in a rent-to-own agreement. You have to foreclose on them. Now, according to the documents, and most rent-to-own documents, that portion of the rent that went towards the purchase is not refundable. Most rent-to-own documents will say that. However, it's really up to the judge, because it's going to go in front of a judge and they're going to say, you know what, the tenant gets everything back, or no, the owner gets to keep the portion that they've already got. Just depends on if they uphold the agreement or not. And in most states, we're basically a commonwealth. In most states, there's some exceptions. The judge would generally have the right to come up with whatever judgment they come up with. They're literally the law. In the courtroom, they can come up with any answer they want, okay? They don't have to uphold the agreement. So let's see, we got the percentages here. 5 to 8%, 5%, 10%, 2 to 5%. Yeah, historically, I've seen all kinds of option amounts, but 5% is probably the most common, okay? So the lease option, you have the option agreement, and let's say I'm gonna purchase a house from Alexandra, and it's a $100,000 house. She would want me to give her $5,000, and in return, we're gonna have a sign, both parties, as a bilateral agreement that says I'll buy the property within 365 days. I'll be able to purchase it, get my own loan, take ownership of the property. And in the interim, I'm going to have a lease that allows me to live there through a traditional lease agreement or rental agreement. And that's really the extent of it, okay? Now, a moment ago, Lana asked a question, in the case of a rent to own and it goes into default and they go to court, who gets to keep the portion that the tenant paid into the purchase price? Okay, and the answer is, it depends on the agreement and what kind of mood the judge is in that day and how well each side presented their case. I mean, let's face it, the tenant could come in there with inspection reports saying, you know what, I felt like I was tricked because this house is anything like what I thought I was supposed to be getting. It's got all kinds of structural problems. Well, clearly, if it's legitimate, the judge is going to find in this case in the tenant's favor. But if the tenant just doesn't show up at court, the owner can show they've been chasing them down for 3 months to no avail. The judge is going to find in favor of the owner. Okay, but let's talk about a lease option. Let's say in a lease option agreement, the tenant defaults on the lease. What happens in that scenario? Can you evict the tenant then, or do you still have to go through a foreclosure process? And the answer is actually in the question. How about Shirley, what do you think? In a lease option, remember, not one dime of the rent goes towards the purchase price. In the option, Rob Lane says eviction. Yeah, Teresa said foreclosures. Lana says eviction. It's actually an eviction. And the reason is the option fee actually has nothing to do with any there's no, the person giving the option fee gets no monetary value out of it. They have no ownership of the property, not $1 worth. And not $1 worth of rent goes towards the purchase price either. The only thing they're purchasing is the right to purchase the physical property at a future date. So some of you are probably wondering, why in the heck would somebody do that? Well, the answer is some of the scenarios you brought up earlier, they maybe are coming through an injury. Maybe they had to start over again. They had to move across country and get a new job. Maybe they went through a divorce, all kinds of things, and they want to rebuild their life. All right. And they feel like with a lease option, they're getting a greater degree of or sense of ownership. You know, in both scenarios, by the way, rent to own and lease option, who would you say has primary responsibility for upkeep and maintenance of the property? In either case, rent to own or lease option, who would you say has the greater responsibility for upkeep and maintenance of the property?
The tenant.
It's the tenant. Yep. Absolutely the tenant. So you put it in your documentation. Now, there could be rare exceptions, like let's say a problem does develop and it's a foundation problem, something like that, that really truly nobody knew about in advance. There's no court in the land that's going to hold the tenant responsible for that. You know, I mean, I think they could, but even in conservative states, they generally would say, you know what, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, you're going to have to foot the bill for this, or at best split the cost with the tenant. But other than something really extreme like that, the tenant's responsible. Lawn care, painting, maintaining, repairing, the whole 9 yards, you know. So let's talk about the benefits. So some other benefits to the buyer, the lease optionee, is they get time to build their credit. They get a whole year to pay their credit card bills on time, pay their phone bills on time, and also demonstrate another year of solid income. Okay, and who is the biggest creditor to the lease optionee? Who's the biggest creditor in this scenario? The owner of the house that you're paying rent to. Yeah, when you're thank you, Alexander, that's correct. So if you own a property and you lease it to someone, that's a contract for payments over time, periodic payments. It's in the eyes of law, it's contract law. It is real estate, but it's the same thing if you bought a car or a jewelry or what have you. You're entering an agreement and it's a form of credit. So you think about this. Let's say they're paying you $1,000 a month for 12 months. Are you extending them credit for $1,000 or for $12,000?
$12,000.
Exactly. Yep. You have an agreement that says they're going to pay you $12,000 in 12 installments of $1,000 each. So there's some tremendous benefits to the buyer, and in this case we call the lease optionee. Another great benefit is this. Would you agree that in most economies, values of properties will go up in a year's time? They will. So what's happening is you're locking in today at current day prices something that you don't have to take responsibility for, at least financially as far as rental goes, for a year later. So you're really, a year later, that thing may have gone up 5%, and yet you get to take over the property at last year's price. So there are some real benefits to this. It's not like it's the rich are getting richer off the poor. It's, you know, the person with the property is extending credit to the buyer, giving them a year to build up their credit and also save their money. And they get to live there and act as if it's their own house at the same time. So there's lots of benefits. The benefit to the seller, or benefits to the seller, are, you know, in a crazy economy, in a down market, where maybe unemployment's high and credit's tight, again, they have another option, another opportunity to sell their property where they otherwise might not be able to. Okay. So, okay. I feel like I'm starting a lecture because we're not a lot of dialogue here, but any questions so far? Any comments? Let me check the chat box here. Let's see, Sasha, how would a realtor get paid on a rent to own or lease option? So Sasha, that is the best question we've had all night so far. You have to work it in the agreement, Sasha. So what I would generally do, and I've done lease options before where I represented the seller, I would say that in some cases the entire option agreement has to go to me, and they don't always like that. I don't always agree. What I would agree to is, let's say it was a 6% commission, and then we know we're only getting 5% option fee. I would say I'll take half of that now. I'll take half of the 5%, and in our example that would be $2,500, and I would get the other half at the end of the term. The risk with that, Sasha, is that, you know, the deal doesn't go through. The buyer doesn't buy, and they move on. Okay, and they lose their option fee. And you agreed with the seller that you wouldn't collect the other half until the transaction was complete. Well, the transaction didn't complete, so at least you got the first half of your commission. And by the way, in a lot of cases, there's not going to be two realtors involved in these scenarios. I mean, there can be, and there definitely has been, or definitely will be. But if you're going to get involved with these types of agreements, lease options and rent to owns, I would do your marketing such that you're basically brokering the whole thing. You want to protect yourself. I'd be hard pressed. Let's face it. Let's say you're representing the renter, right, in the lease option. The only thing the renter is really giving to the owner that you can claim any part of as far as commission goes is really the rent, because you're helping them lease the apartment. So maybe you get 1 month's rent or half a month's rent, okay? But the option agreement's a separate thing altogether. They might advertise property to rent. So you really got to be careful. I would generally only get involved if I'm representing the owner side. Does this make sense, guys? Like why you would do it that way? Yeah. I'd be hard pressed to represent a buyer, in these kind of scenarios. So in any case, the seller wins, the buyer wins, and basically it's just delayed gratification. Now, in the case of a lease option, let's say the tenant does default, they don't pay their rent, and they get evicted. Who keeps the option fee?
You do.
The owner. It's non-refundable. Yep. And I've never seen that not be upheld in court. It's people go to court, but it's an option agreement. Everybody's fine and everybody knew what they were doing, and I've never seen one get overturned. And it's also something you don't let them in to the property until you've actually collected the option fee. Yeah, you just don't. No promises, no future dated checks, anything like that. It's basically cleared funds, and then you let them have possession of the property on a lease basis. So, in any case, you guys want to take a look at some of these documents? Okay, so let's do. Oh, this is so Alexander saying there's a company called. There's a company called Divvy, and the offer rent to own, but the realtor gets paid at the beginning because they buy the house that the renter chose. So in other words, Alexander, is that, so let's say in both cases, either the option fee or the deposit on the rent to own, if that's not enough to cover the commission, are you saying that in the agreement, the owner would come up with the funds to cover the commission even if they were short? Like at the beginning of the agreement?
So what you do is that you find the person that will qualify for their program, and they will be leasing from them. But what you do is that you help the renter find the house. So this company buys the house. So they, you get paid when they buy the house. And then when they resell the house to the renter, that's on them. You don't get paid again, but you got paid when Didi bought the house initially that the renter wanted.
Okay, so this is a program where they're helping the investor buy the property, and instead of doing a straight rental, they do either a rent to own or lease option.
Yeah, they do rent to own.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's in that scenario, the owner is actually a new purchaser themselves. They're purchasing a property with the intent of leasing it out on a rent to own or lease option. I see. Yeah, so I'm just wondering though, but let's say you have a client who already owns the house, in that case, you definitely want to get paid as much upfront as possible. And that's why, by the way, just a side note, in commercial leases, what I often recommend to people to the agents is, often you're given a choice. You can take it's basically 6% of the total lease amount. Let's say you have a 10-year commercial lease, and you're going to get paid 6%, Freudian slip, 6% of the total 10 years, right? 120 months, $1,000 a month, you get 6% of that. Well, that's like an annuity. It actually has value. It's a commodity that you can sell. So what you can do is you can say, I'll take that, but instead of me getting paid out over 10 years, for a discount, I'll take all my commission now. And you might get less than 6%, but at least you get your money up front, right? As opposed to taking it month by month and only to find out when the economy tanks, the tenants in these commercial properties or businesses close up shop, and the landlord of the commercial property is no longer bringing in revenue. they're sure not going to pay you. You know, they're going to be in trouble and probably will lose the property. So that's why I always tell people with really long-term leases, usually commercial leases, I mean, some of them are 30 years, some of them are 99 years, right? I'd say anything definitely beyond 10 years. I would consider taking a discount to take all your commission up front. Does that make sense, guys? If you think about it, there's some equations you can look at this if you ever want to. If you ever study for the CCIM, there's a financial class you have to take, and you're going to be looking at current value of future cash flows, right? And the future value of current cash flows, and all these ratios and equations. It's fairly complex. You're basically doing the same thing that actuarials do. They're taking historical data and they're predicting what may happen and what the best case scenarios and worst case scenarios. So right now, it does appear we're at or near the top of this economy. So if I was entering into if I was a agent and I was representing a seller on a 10-year lease, I would probably opt to take my commission now as opposed to waiting out the 10 years. Because I know if the economy goes down, you know, there's a greater risk that I won't get paid. So you have to kind of look at all those factors and determine that. And determine what is the current value of future cash flows, right? Because the dollar loses value every single day. I mean, just look at this last year. Look at what gasoline costs. Look at what lumber costs, you know? It's right in front of us. So in any case, get off on a bit of a tangent there. Let me go to one of the documents here. And I'll do a screen share here in just a second. Hang on 1 second. Okay, I want to show you one that's actually a hybrid. This is really, I've never seen this before. Lana's asking, how much of a discount would you take? Well, I would try for as small a discount as possible. So the shorter the lease term, Lana, the less that I will take it, that I'll give it a discount. The longer the lease term, the more I'll give. In other words, 99 years is a long time. And if I look at $1,000 a month for 99 years, that's worth, you know, 99,000 times 12, whatever that comes out to, 1.2 million roughly. Okay. And if I can give up 30%, right, or to say 25% and take 900,000 now, I'm absolutely going to do it. You know, I might even do it for 40% based on what I think is going to happen in the economy. So the longer the lease on a long-term commercial lease, the greater I'll give up as a discount. That's a great question, by the way. Thank you. Okay, so let's go back to this. I want to show you one thing here down there. I'll go into the part of lease I really want to talk about, and then we'll go back through everything directly. Is this the one I was looking at? Purchase price. Right. Actually, that's not the one. Let me leave that up and go to the next one. That's a regular, let's see, lease, appliances, security deposit, sale or determination. That's a street lease. Where's the one I got? Hopefully I saved it. Let's see, rent to own. I think this is it. Okay. So let me do a screen share. What I want to show you here is it's sort of a hybrid agreement. And everyone that I've ever worked on was either a straight rent to own or a lease option, but it didn't give you options to do one or the other or both. This one's really unique. So let me find a section and I'll go over it with you. And I'm going to take your votes on whether you like this approach or not. So let me get down here. Okay, option to purchase. So here's a typical option paragraph. Option to purchase. The landlord hereby grants tenant the option to purchase the premises as is. Total purchase price for the premises will be check one, put in the current price now, or a check determined agreed upon parties at a later time. See, this would be an unbelievable advantage to the owner. Most cases, it's no, you set the price now. You put in the option term. Okay. Now, I've seen options, the terms be anywhere from 1 to 5 years. If you're wondering why, which one would, how do you determine the length of it? I'd say it would it would be determined based on the current economic situation. If the economy just tanked, like in 2000, late 2007, early 2008, I would probably give them more time. Like maybe I lean towards 3 years versus just 1 year. In most cases, I'm going to try for as short a period as possible. So this is the owner speaking. I would generally go for as short a period as possible. But if we're economically at the very beginning of a recession, I would likely stretch that to up to 3 years. Okay. Any case, let's see. Here's what I wanted to go over with you. This is really unique because it combines both principles, right? So here's it is. A portion of the monthly rent as consideration for the option of purchase, tenant acknowledges that the tenant is paying consideration to the landlord in the form of non-refundable rent, and at the agreed upon monthly amount set forth in the agreement. Unless otherwise stated in this agreement, this amount is non-refundable to the tenant. Okay, here's where the tenant gets credit for what they're paying in. Okay, check, provided that the tenant timely exercises the option to purchase, if not in default of his current agreement, and closes the conveyance of the premises as set forth in the agreement. And you put in there the dollar amount from each monthly lease payment that tenant timely made prior to the closing shall be credited towards the purchase price. Let's say it's a 1 year lease in 1 year option period, okay? And it's $1,000 a month. You're gonna give them 10% of each rent payment credit, which is $100. So they get $1,200 credited to them at the time of closing, okay? There's another option here. So these are just boxes you check off. A non-refundable upfront fee, that's your option fee, as consideration for the option to purchase, tenant agrees to pay the landlord a non-refundable fee of, and you put it in there, $5,000, $3,000, whatever the case may be. At the execution of the agreement, which is now, not in the future, right? Unless otherwise stated in this agreement, the option payment is non-refundable to the tenant. Okay. Now here's how they get credit. Here's how the tenant gets credit for what they put in there. Now this is another thing I don't agree with. Right. Let me just read it to you and I'll explain. Provided that the tenant timely exercises the option to purchase, is not in default of this agreement, and closes the conveyance of the premises as set forth in the agreement. Okay. Check all that apply. Number one, the option fee shall be credited against the purchase price of the closing. Okay. Number two, a portion of the option fee shall be credited against the purchase price of the closing. And number three, a portion of each monthly lease payment that tenant timely made prior to the closing should be credited towards the purchase price of the closing. So here's what I'm thinking. When I look at this piece right here, remember what I said earlier, the option fee actually has nothing to do with equity in the property. It's simply you're buying the right to purchase the property at a future date. You're not actually buying any part of the property. Well, in this case here, it sounds like they're taking a portion of the option fee, allowing the optionee to apply it towards the purchase. So let's say the deal goes south and it goes to litigation. And I want your input on this because I can tell you what I think, but I've never seen this before. How do you think the judge is going to view this if a portion of that option fee is now actually being applied towards the purchase of the property? You see what I'm saying? So let me stop the screen so I can see your faces here. So what do you think there? Go ahead and shout out the answer.
Now he has,
What do you think the answer is?
ownership.
Correct.
He's got
I
skin in
agree.
the game. Now he's no longer a tenant, but now he's an owner. So all bets are off as far as being able to get an eviction at this juncture.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's basically good old fashioned, it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, landlord law or landlord tenant law, excuse me. The one we're following is Landlord Tenant Act of 1957, and it was amended sometime in the 90s or something. But To me, I would say if I was an attorney, that I would argue if I was a tenant for the tenant, excuse me, an attorney for the tenant, that I would say the language is ambiguous because it uses the term option, right, which is typically has nothing to do with equity of the property, and that they're applying part of the option monies to the purchase of the property. And if you think about it, there's a term called plain language laws, okay? Plain language laws. And what that means is every state, it's a federal mandate, every state has to review their contracts. In the case of real estate, all real estate contracts in every state are pre-approved all the way to the state Supreme Court level. Did you guys know that? If any form we get from our boards and our real estate commissions, by law have to be pre-approved in the court system. They approve it all the way to the Supreme Court level. Okay. In plain language, what that means is if a consumer comes in there and they have a smart attorney, and they say, my client did not understand the terms of that contract because it uses the term option, but yet they get a portion of the option is credited to the purchase price of the property. I'm telling you, 99 times out of 100, even if the judge was thinking, hey, I'm going to cut the owner a break, they won't if the attorney for the tenant uses that kind of language. All right. It falls under what's called consumer protection law. Without getting into a lot of details here, really smart attorneys in real estate cases involving large sums of money will not ignore the contract law, the real estate contract law. What they'll do is they'll introduce consumer protection law, and they're allowed to do that. Consumer protection law is designed to protect the consumers, all of us, from basically getting a bad deal, and that's what they do, and that's how they'll win. Okay, so that's why I always tell people: always use your state-approved forms for any sales agreement. And I know I'm saying this because, and I'm an investor, and I know a lot of people say, well, we have our own contracts, we're investors, and I understand that. But the way around that is you start off with a standard pre-approved agreement, and then you can add addendums, right? And in the addendums, you put in your creative language that you got off the internet, or whatever your investor language says, you put that in the addendum. Now, technically, an addendum overrides whatever language is in the original agreement if the two bodies of text address the same body of law. That's how that's determined. So, in any case, back to this. I don't think I like that agreement. I found it when I was doing my research today because I wanted to find something new, and I saw that popped up there. And I don't know who wrote it, but it's almost like a cafeteria style agreement where you can kind of pick what you want. And to me, lease option and rent to own are two totally different things and should not be commingled. So, in any case, let's get back to the agreement. Hang on one second. Let me see if I'm still sharing. Share. I think I am. All right. Okay, good. So I think we covered that section. Now let me go back up. Well, by the way, I wanted to give you some other advice. Look at how long this agreement is. All right. It actually has in here, lead-based paint. Actually, that's appropriate for a lease because this is basically a lease agreement. Okay. But the fact that they have an option section in here where we just were, all right, whenever you do an option agreement, we were always advised if it's a lease option and not a rent to own, it's a true lease option, the option agreement should be as short as possible. The more a judge can say that sort of looks like a sales agreement. If you start talking about title and deeds and inspections and all that kind of stuff, a judge would say, well, that sort of looks more like a sales agreement than an option agreement. An option agreement should just simply say, plain and simple, I, Gary Wilson, give Rob Lane the right to purchase this property on, June 28th, 2022 for the fee of $5,000. That's pretty much all it should say, right? You don't talk about who's going to pay for what. That's all in a sales agreement. you'll do that when you exercise the option next year. Okay. However, on a lease, you want to have as much language in there as you can humanly possibly put in there to protect yourself. So that was a rent-to-own agreement. That really surprised me when I saw that. So this one here, I think, is a straight residential lease. Let's skip that. And let's go to this lease to own. They call it a lease to own. But to me, it's actually more, it's really an option agreement. So let's look at this real quick so you can compare and contrast. All right. And look at how short this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's way shorter than the other one. Let's look at some of the language. Up top, of course, you have to put in, the sellers and buyers information, and they put in their landlord tenant. By the way, this is well, it says it has in here rent, but I believe it said some that are gonna. This is depending on the lease option, not the lease agreement, not being violated. So I think let's see if I can find that real quick. I'm pretty sure I saw it here before. A consideration. Okay, that's basic boilerplate there. Parties here to agree to the following: rent, payable equal monthly installments, security deposit returned upon termination of this lease, the payment of all rents due. Like I said, they are considering this a lease. There was one I saw. It was an option agreement. It actually referred to the lease, which is what it really should do. Let's see, tenant condition or promise, premises, no subletting, right to termination, option term. Okay, there's the option term. Basically, you give it whatever time frame you want, usually a year. Notice required to exercise option, option consideration, purchase price, exclusivity, closing and settlement. See, it doesn't really say a lot there. That's not too bad. Financing disclaimer. That's just a disclaimer. Remedies upon default. Commission. No real estate commissions or any other commissions shall be paid in connection with this transaction. So this is where, why you wouldn't want to use that one. Or better yet, you have an addendum that overrides that. Governing law, you want to name the county and the state. That's the entire agreement. So this really, in my opinion, is another sort of a hybrid one where they have lease terms in here. Not all the terms, just basically rent, utilities, and that's it. And a few tenant rights, and that's pretty more tenant obligations. The rest of it's really about the option. So if it wasn't for this one section up here, what I would say is reference the lease and put all these terms in the actual lease. This is nowhere near a regular lease agreement. So let me show you the regular lease agreement. It's this. So I would take that paragraph off the one where we're just in. Oops, hang on a second. That's not the one I wanted. I thought this was the right one. Let's click on it. Yeah, this is it. Straight lease, yep. So this is what a lease looks like. This is not a state's lease, by the way. It's not a Virginia lease or anything like that. But if you notice in here, it's all about the lease. There's nothing about options or rent to own or anything. So I would, for an option, if I was doing a lease option, I would use this lease here, okay? In this document here, we were just saying, and I would take this section out that has to do with rents, utilities, tenant further agrees, and I would take that out, continue with paragraph 4, and way up top, I would take this this lease to purchase, and I would simply say real estate option agreement. That's what I would say. Those two together would give you a good solid lease option duo there. So the other one was kind of a hybrid, kind of unique. Okay, let's do this. Let's open the floor up for some Q&A. All right, who's got some questions? We'll give a prize to the person with the most questions. I'll make you an apple pie. How about that?
How about the situation when the mortgage is impossible to get because the sale price is less than 100,000? So the buyer, you cannot do even option because you basically have to be a second mortgage. I did it twice. They did 30% down payment, and basically I'm a bank. The problem I came up with, it's in Pennsylvania. They only understand pure sale or pure lease. And I can't register it in town as sold because my name is still on the deed. I'm still an owner. According to the lawyer who did the paperwork, they said that it's the safest way. It's like a car, basically, car loan, because it's for 5 years, because the amount is like less than 50,000. They say that in case if buyer defaults, I basically can evict them because they still not full owners. But after listening what you said, now I worry that I will not be able to evict them because they have ownership.
Yeah, if in Pennsylvania.
The state that can screw me up.
So Solana, you're the owner of the property and you're selling it to someone else through
I
a
sold
lease
it to
option?
someone else. It's not a lease option, it's real sale, but I'm the bank. Because there is no bank I can find who can give 50,000 as a loan. It's too small.
Yeah, it is tougher now to get the small loans, but you can still get them. I would definitely go with the small local community banks. You're probably not going to get big banks to do a loan that size. But credit unions, small local banks, that's the way to go. But really, it's the buyer's responsibility to do that. I mean, you can certainly help them out and give them some suggestions, but I would absolutely.
But for now, I still have the mortgage, so I kind of got stuck with the city because they don't know how to register me.
Well, if you're owner financing them, yeah, they're giving you payments every month. Is your loan, is it amortized or is it simple interest?
It's the amortized. I have two of them with the 6% interest.
Okay, well, if it's amortized, then absolutely every payment they give you, a portion of that is definitely principal. So you're their part owner. You know, did you do a land contract or how did you do an official sales agreement?
It's not a full sales agreement because we were afraid because it's a very poor town with bad reputation. But we found good people. They starting to move in, prices went up. So I kind of like them because all of them very responsible, pay on time. But because the amount is so small, they were not able to get any kind of mortgage. Everything they pay, it's a principal and interest. They're responsible for taxes, utility, everything, all the repairs, everything. They own it. But I did it last year. But this year, when I started register, there is no options how to register it. We didn't want to transfer title in their name because there is a 5% transfer fee. And if I transfer, then it's a foreclosure, like full foreclosure, because my name will not be on the money.
Yeah. Well, the good news is it sounds like you're still the owner. So congratulations on that. You're basically have somebody paying you mortgage payments. And this is my opinion. I'm not an attorney, but I always think, what would Cliff do? Cliff was my lifelong attorney. I'm pretty sure if it went to some type of litigation, the judge would say, because you still own the property, okay, and you have I don't know, it sounds like a partially executed sales agreement, that he may actually convert what they've been paying you to rent and give them credit for rent paid. But are they paying you on time? By the way, are they paying you every month?
Yeah, they pay me every month. They prepay sometimes. One of them prepaying, the other one doesn't. Because it was pandemic, I was worried that they will stop paying, but so if they own part of it, they kind of feel happy about it, so they pay.
All right. If nothing else happens and they keep paying you for the term, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is, when they're done, you're going to follow the same procedure. It's almost like you have a land contract where you still have title to the property, right? They have some of the owners, some of the rights of ownership, but you still have legal title. Well, what happened is then you would transfer title to them. You could just do a quick claim deed. That's all you got to do. But I would absolutely not do that until they're completely paid up. In the interim, what they could possibly do is, if I would just tell them, talk to local banks, go to join a credit union, and see if they give them a money purchase mortgage.
Just buy me out.
Yeah, and they would basically just buy you out, and they would get credit for everything they paid you so far. But if everybody's happy and you're making money and they're happy, I mean, right now, this again is just my opinion. All right.
Mhm.
I think that sometime in the future, or I know for a fact, in sometime in the future, we're going to have a correction. We just don't know when. But it's a mathematical certainty. I've never seen a market go up and up and up and never go down. But I've also never seen a down market never go back up again. But based on where we are, if you got a steady stream of income coming in, that could come in really handy in another year or two if we slide into another recession, which is likely to happen.
Well, it saved me during pandemic. So that was a good thing because I don't have to fix anything.
Yeah. I think you may have just come up with your own. We'll call it the Lana approach. You just came up with your own, your own program there. That's pretty cool. I don't know how that thing ended up going through that. I don't understand. Was an attorney involved at all, or?
It was attorney involved in doing it. They were informed that they are not on the title. They are informed that when they paid it off, they will pay the transfer fee and get the title in their name and whatever that needs to be that to remove me and keep them.
Right. Yeah.
The part of the protection of the reasons were two. The loans are 50,000, so it's very small. It's like really impossible to find, at least a year ago. And I didn't want to, my manager was retiring. He had a heart attack, so I was 2 hours away and was not ready in pandemic to look for a new manager. And the third one was if they stop paying, they claim that in that town, I can just do regular eviction. Like if they were renters because they are not on title. Until your seminar, I didn't think about that portion of the ownership. Is it different in different states? Is it different in different towns? Like how can I investigate it?
Well, you have to have a Pennsylvania attorney license, and in that county too, Pennsylvania, an attorney can only practice in counties that they're licensed in. You're licensed at the state, but there's something you have to do county by county. But what you have a lot of right now, actually, it's a classic land contract. You just don't have the paperwork that identifies it that way, but you actually have a land contract. That's what you have.
I'll research that.
Yep. So this is weird. Just gave me this is being recorded and we've been on for about an hour. So, okay. And that was a good one. That was a great exercise there. Anybody have any questions on that? Isn't it amazing that thing? I mean, like Tom, would you agree? That's kind of,
This is
I'm almost
Vanessa.
baffled how that thing actually went through,
Hey.
Yeah. Hey,
Hey, Gary. So could the buyers actually get a personal loan from a bank and pay her off?
Yeah, you could do something like that if they had collateral, something that in
Like a
the old
signature
days.
loan?
Yeah, signature loan would work. Any way they could get financing. It doesn't have to be collateralized by a piece of real estate, but I'm gathering they couldn't. They might not qualify because the signature loan is based on your credit worthiness. And you could, if you've never seen one before, it's like having a home equity line of credit, except it's not anchored, collateralized with your home. HLOC, home equity line of credit. It's a PLOC, personal line of credit. It's based on your credit worthiness. But I've seen people get loans from banks where they're collateralizing art, jewelry, classic cars, all kinds of stuff. And it's not just people who are in dire straits. I mean, I've seen wealthy people do that kind of thing too. They're in fact, if you look at most most mortgage and note documents, they're asking you usually at the application level to list all of your assets, and they ask you to name, art, jewelry, coin collections, stamp collections, things like that, because they can legally come back and attach that in a lawsuit if the property, gets destroyed and they can't make good on their loan amount that they're outstanding. They can come back to your personal assets and claim all that stuff. And that, by the way, if you're wondering why people declare bankruptcy, a lot of times it's usually because of that, because they know they're losing the house in foreclosure. They just don't want to lose the family heirlooms in a collection either. They want to protect that in a bankruptcy. So, in any case, lots of chats coming. Let's check on these. How much discount would you use? I think we answered that. Okay. Augustine, I heard lease options and land contracts are not legal in Texas. Has anyone in Texas done these lately? I tell you what, Augustine, let's check on that and we can report back on that maybe next week. Will this work in the higher end markets? So Sasha, you're talking about what Lana did, where she owner finance? Because yeah, you can owner finance in all 50 states.
Oh, no, I'm talking about like the rent to own or the lease options.
Oh, yeah, it's not going to be as common. Those types of investing opportunities or selling opportunities are definitely more prevalent in a down market when credit's tight. So those are the two factors: market's down, unemployment's high, money's tight, and credit markets are tight. In other words, banks are just not lending like they normally do. And so these two opportunities are more common in a down market. They absolutely can happen in any market. I mean, you can lease option, for example, let's say you're 80 years old and you own 10 houses and they're all completely paid for and you've been renting them out, but you want to get out of the landlord business. So what you can do is you can do sort of what Lana did, which sell them, and you sell them yourself, or you can use a realtor if you want, and you hold the mortgage, okay? You can do it that way, and then you're the bank. Now in Texas, that would be a good idea, because in Texas has very favorable owner laws. In the case of bankruptcy, I mean, they can get people out as little as 35 days on a foreclosure. It's crazy. But in terms of the discussion, I have we call him an uncle. He's actually one of my mom's high school friends, best friend's husband, and they live in Magnolia, Texas. So I went out there to visit him a couple years back because they're doing this. They do some owner financing, and they'll do other ones. So you know what, Augustine, I'm thinking, I wonder if that's why they're doing owner financing, because maybe Texas doesn't like rent to own or lease option. We actually just may have answered our own question here. Let's see. Augustine, her lease options, land contracts. Okay, so Augustine, you mentioned lease option and land contracts, but you didn't mention rent to own, because I thought the guy I'm talking about mentioned rent to own at one point. And Augustine says, yes, that's what I heard. So I would say, so Sasha, back to your question, remember there's so many variables. It could depend on the economy and the individual's personal circumstances, owner and buyer. In the case of my sort of uncle, he now has an annuity where he gets like $10,000 up front in a solid monthly payment. And he knows in most cases they'll end up refinancing in 3 or 5 or 10 years anyways. Then he gets the full payment then, but at least he's delaying and spreading out his capital gains burden. He also knows this. He knows that a certain number of them are going to default. They're just going to not be able to make their mortgage payments. And he knows that in Texas, it's very easy for an owner to foreclose on a property like that. So he gets the property back and then he sells it again. Doesn't happen a lot, but I mean, 80 years old, he's looking at this as he's trying to maximize his cash position as much as possible in what he believes to be his later years, So, hey, Sandy, by the way, good to see you. Let's see, Augustine, Sasha. Augustine, let's see, this is another question. On how much discount would you take? Okay, answer that. Okay, I guess that's pretty much it. I think this is going to go down as one of our fastest classes ever. Usually we go an hour and a half. So, hey, by the way, next week, oh, did you guys get the message? I'm on vacation next week, and we call it a meet. It's like an operations meeting Gina participates representing all of us on the sales side with me, and then Beverly represents the operation side. And in this particular meeting, they had Jody and Judy in there too. And anyways, I mean this sincerely. I was planning on having class next Monday, but they voted me, and I kept saying I always teach classes when I'm on vacation. It's just 1 hour, and they said most people are going to be off on the 5th because the 4th is on Sunday, and they were declaring federal holiday on me. So they used a loophole, so I didn't have to teach class next Monday. So in any case, no class next Monday, and what we'll do is we'll pick up on the 12th, and let me see if I wrote down what we're doing on the 12th. Oh, you know what? I think Gina's teaching. I think Gina's teaching that night. If not, we're going to do what's called deal or no deal. We're going to look at an example of a property, a case study. We're going to go over all the numbers, let you guys calculate what you think the return is and determine if it's a deal or a no deal. On the 19th and 26th of July, by the way, this is all based on the survey results we got from you in April, so I appreciate you, those of you who did the survey. One of my oldest and best clients is going to come on, Joe Chawansky, and we're going to go over 2 or possibly 3 of his deals so you can see the kind of things we did and you know, how he was able to really, you know, maneuver through the last recession and still make money. And he's my age, he's retired, his wife's retired, and they're living a good life. And then on the 26th, I'm gonna see if Bobby Appleby can come on, because another request we had from you is that can we have some of our agents step up and talk about what they're doing to do so many transactions, and Bobby's certainly one of them. He was the very first person to meet the team split limit and cap out at the same time, and it was lightning fast. The guy was just, I don't know how I know how he did it, but his level of energy surpassed anything I think I've seen. So you're gonna get to hear from Bobby. That's pretty much July. And then again, any suggestions you have, please let me know and we'll work them in there. So, okay. Any final questions or thoughts? Well, it's good to see you on. I see some of the soon to be newer folks, Tom and Sandy and Michael, all the veterans. I'm always glad to see you guys, obviously. And let's see if I'm leaving anybody out here. Let's see, I think that is pretty much it. Yep. We got Daniel Dominguez too. So Daniel's soon gonna hold the record for the largest sales price on the team. So I'm gonna keep you in suspense on that one. So everybody say an Irish prayer for Daniel. So we're in the tail end of this project, and we'll hold the record for the biggest project, the biggest sale. So so let's see. Rob, thanks for your just couldn't log in. Can you send him the link, please? Yeah. So Rob, what are those? Oh, you mean he couldn't get into the class, Rob? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's right. I sent him the login, but for some reason he wouldn't accept. He's still with KW. You know, he hasn't transferred totally yet.
Yeah.
And he said it wouldn't accept his email. I said, well, use your personal one. He says, I tried that and it wouldn't loop me in. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it should work. You give them the link that's now, there's one link to register you for all the classes coming up for the rest of the year. You give them that one?
That's what I thought I sent him. I'm pretty sure I did. So,
yeah.
But, you know, you can have Beverly send him that link, or she's listening. Maybe she can send it to him.
Yeah. You know what? Send it to me too, if you don't mind, Rob. The one you sent to Ojos, send it to me too. Yeah.
I'll just forward you the email I sent to him. That way you'll see it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, listen, you guys have an awesome rest of the week and a wonderful 4th of July weekend. I understand there's some fireworks shows actually going to happen this year. I'll be on the beach, hopefully watching fireworks over the water. It's one of my favorite places to do that. And keep in mind, even though I'm on vacation, I'm not scheduling regularly scheduled calls, but when you're out there in the field and something comes up, absolutely text me, call me. I'd rather have you do that than wait or you know, maybe guess wrong or something like that. Just, I don't mind if it's something really urgent, like highest and best scenario. You're negotiating, you're not familiar with the term. Don't let yourself be stuck. You can go to workplace page and post it there. But if you wait more than an hour, I'd say definitely text me. just text me and we'll get it solved, you know? Sound fair? Okay, guys. Well, God bless you and your families. And I will talk to you after next week or during next week if something urgent does come up. And we'll see. Oh, the gig leaders, any gig leaders. This Wednesday night, we have the monthly gig review. If you want to have your own gig group, your own global investor group, you don't have one yet, definitely participate. We go over the results from the prior month and make plans for the next month. So make sure that link is on our workplace page, GIA workplace page. That also, you can find that registration link there. So Alexandra and Ursula, you might want to do. Oh, Alexandra, set up a call with you and me and Ursula so we can talk about property management. I have an idea. If you don't want to wait till the end of summer to start, we can start now, like on a small scale. But I'll go over that with you. Is that okay? Okay. Okay,
I
guys.
have a first question.
Yes, ma'am.
When I was filing all the paperwork, it said that EXP doesn't like us to do property management. How do you organize it?
Yeah. So EXP does not offer property management. And I'll give you an explanation how this works. So the EXP broker of record for Maryland owns a property management company. So the way you're able to do this is you can own a property management company. It can't be underneath the EXP umbrella. It has to be your own separate entity. So separate tax ID, separate E&O insurance, separate LLC entity altogether. And most important of all, separate broker of record. There's only a few handful of states that will let you have a license at two different entities. EXP does not allow that, but they do make an exception for people that have a separate real estate related company, as long as it's a separate tax ID, E&O insurance, the whole 9 yards. We have an example up in Pennsylvania where I have 3 licenses, and my Pennsylvania license, I have what's called an exception document, allows me to make my license be available to another agent joining our team with a property management company, where that Pennsylvania license is used as a broker of record for that property management company. And my other license in Wyoming is used for commission income and revenue share and all that. The one in Virginia is sitting there looking for something to do. So any case, so Lana, that's how you do it. We have a project coming up in the future where we're going to do the same team approach for anybody who wants to participate. But right now I've got my hands full with the gig, and we want to make sure that gets up and running and is stable, because we're going to go live in person with these gigs maybe as early as September all across the country. And then that'll really help them take off, right? It's very difficult to do these online. So in any case, back to property management, keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. The person I'm bringing on has a team of 12 people in property management already with a few hundred units. And I taught him years ago. He's one of my, even before I had official training, he was sort of a, I don't know what you call it, a protege or an apprentice or something. And he's now one of the top agents in the area up there. And he's doing quite well. So I'm going to have him head that project up for me, and I'll give him all the material and all the training material and all that. So, but that's
because right now, why I'm asking, there are some people who don't want to sell. They want to put the house in Airbnb situation. And because we already have relationships with those people, it makes sense for us to kind of manage it, because we are in the state and they're out of state. And for them, it's very convenient, especially if they spend like half a year in Florida, half a year in New Jersey. I have at least 3 people who are interested in arrangement like that.
Or some in New Jersey and some in New York?
Well, they in New Jersey.
Okay. So you're allowed to manage property for one owner. If it's only one owner, you can manage for one owner, even without a license. Okay, but it can only be one owner. And you have to be like an employee of the owner. As soon as you add a second owner, they're going to give you what's called, dealer status or business status, and then you definitely got to follow the real estate commission rules. So if it's one owner, I'd say you're probably okay. And maybe just do that just to start and start building your infrastructure. This is what I can tell.
But when the second one comes, what should I do?
Well, then you gotta follow the steps and set yourself up properly. So what I was going to suggest to Alexandra and Ursula is start with your most favorite owner with the most properties, Let's work through building, QuickBooks, getting your contractors lined up, just basically build your infrastructure on a small scale. We call that learning small, do it on a small scale. And then you'll be ready for when Dustin comes on board and you want to start adding more owners later on. I mean, I would definitely not recommend trying to launch a battleship right off the bat. I would definitely launch a dinghy. And then just like captains in airplanes, they have the pilots start off with smaller planes and build their way up. Same thing with business. Think of it as a campfire. You start with the kindling first. You light the little kindling first. Never light the big log first. You light the kindling, then you work your way up to the bigger and bigger sticks and branches and finally the logs. Same thing in business. So I would say, if you a lot of set up a strategy call so we can go over it in more detail. But yeah, and then we can go over it. We can see where you do like a SWOT analysis and see what makes the most sense right now.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. So everybody's saying good night and go get my apple pie and my ice cream. I'm going to actually have apple pie and ice cream tonight. So I think I earned it. I was a good boy. Okay, guys, you have a wonderful week. Thanks for participating. Spread the word. Remember, always invite your investors to these classes. Now that we know what the subject is a month in advance, and if there's other agents you would like to partner with or perhaps bring on board, let them observe what we do and how we do it and let them see for themselves. And it's a great way to bring people in one step at a time and more respectfully too. So keep that in mind. So, all right, have a good night. God bless you and your families, and we'll see you next time.